The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel are Joanne Mercier. Hey, Joanne.
Hey, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. Folks, I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you are sure to enjoy called Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and you can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/mysterious. So just to get right into things today, we've got some great listener feedback I want to share with you right now. We talked recently, last episode, about Your Tech Has a Death Date was the title of the episode. And we talked about how a lot of tech these days can't be repaired, can't be upgraded or updated or fixed, and has to be, tossed out because you can't fix it. And so we got some feedback from James on Facebook, who wrote, planned obsolescence is very real. And with the push for lean manufacturing, so is the avoidance of over-engineering. Gone are the days of products that last forever. Sales doesn't like durable products. I worked at a manufacturing company that made vacuum cups. One of our engineers was telling me about a new vacuum cup they designed that lasted twice as long as the old cup. He told me it was presented to the sales team, but they didn't like it because it would mean they would make less sales calls to the customers. I don't think we move forward with it. We don't fix things, we just replace them. In 1999, I was in prerequisite technology training for a computer sales job, and this quote came from one of the instructors. So, and then he shared it with a picture of a TV from the refrigerator from the 1980s that still runs compared to our refrigerators today that they tell us we have to replace every 10 years or so.
Oh, but in the 1980s, they were saying they don't build them like the fridges back in the 60s. So, I mean, let's...
Well, the fridges back in the 50s, those could survive a nuclear blast. You could, hide in one, right? Just like Indiana Jones.
You could hide in one. You could hide in one during a nuclear blast, and you'd be all right.
But kids were hiding in them. That's the problem.
Well, yeah. But that was the Indiana Jones, the Crystal Skull, was the one where he hid in the
what
to survive.
What movie is that? I've never heard of that movie.
Oh, you'll get to hear me and Shelley Kelly and Thomas Salerno, I think it is, talk about that movie coming up soon on the Secrets of Movies and TV Shows.
Oh,
we had a listener request that we review
plug.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
no.
It's going to be a fun, painful experience, and so
so it's gonna be like some of the Star Trek episodes that we've talked about that we basically spend the whole time ranting. It's gonna be like that.
Yeah, it probably will be. It'll be fun. It'll be fun. But yes, thank you, James. It's so true that there is a level of planned obsolescence out there where they don't want these things to survive for too long. On the other hand, we're paying so much for these things up front that it doesn't really,
And it's frustrating as there are companies, and I listened to the episode, and I agree a lot with what you guys said, but they can design some repairability into these devices. They know how to do that. Mm-hmm. They really can. I mean, you can look at even phones, 5 years ago that you could still replace the batteries, and they weren't any thicker than what they have today. So I mean, there's ways they could do it.
I listened to the episode as well, and I'm just totally verklempt that my Sonicare is going to be dead in 4 years. But no, I mean, this planned obsolescence, it's a shame because, like with Apple products, and I'll always say that, some of them you can't kill. And they work fine. And it's just that you either can't plug them into something newer, mm-hmm. or they just don't function the same way. And it's a shame that these things can't be retrofitted and rejiggered so that they can continue to be using until their natural death, mm-hmm. or until somebody throws it out of a window.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, those are the two things. It's either the software gets outdated or the hardware doesn't work, usually a battery. And that's the kind of stuff like that Apple has problems with, is the battery stuff, because watches and AirPods, as we talked about, watches and AirPods, you can't replace the batteries. You could take your phone in for a battery replacement. It's like these kiosks or repair shops will do it for you. But, never forget about a watch or AirPods. Those are lost causes. Yeah,
unfortunately, my watch is starting to.
Yeah, that's pretty much what drives. I think what drives most watch upgrades is it won't last all day, and that's the thing. All right, but thank you, James, for your feedback. We love to get feedback from our listeners. So let's move on to our first segment today, where we're talking about this new Pew Research Center study or poll survey that they came out with called Teens, Social Media, and Technology. And this is a periodic survey that they do. The last one was, I think, 2015 they came out with. And so they're updating, how did teens use, as it says, social media and technology today? And there's some interesting findings in it. But overall, what did you think of what we saw here in this study? Just any top level thoughts about it? Are we doomed?
No, but I know they're not on Facebook anymore. That's for old people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they are on YouTube constantly. Those are the two places. I mean, you can find them on YouTube. I can find my husband on YouTube because he's like, everything that you want to know about how to do something is on YouTube. But I know kids are mostly watching influencers, or they're watching what we would call programs that aren't on mainstream streaming, for example. I don't know TikTok. I don't want to know TikTok. But from my point of view, of somebody who's trying to work with these young people in a, religious setting, I got to know where they are in order to reach them.
Right. Right.
And, when I hear, put it up on Facebook, I'm like, well, they're not there, folks.
Yeah.
Got to keep up. How about you, Father Cory? What top level thoughts on this?
It scares me. It absolutely scares me. The idea that these kids don't know how to disconnect. They do not know how to disconnect. When you see, 46%, I think it was, that they're on constantly. Yeah. The number of teens that have been online almost constantly has doubled since 2015, and that's 46%. That's almost half of teens do not know how to put down the smartphone and go away.
Right. Constantly means, that I'd like to see the definition that they use for constantly.
Yeah, I would too.
But probably means, using it, in an app, have an app open and using the phone, probably 8 to 10 hours a day, probably something like that.
I'm assuming constantly means they're the the stereotypical kid that you see there with the phone constantly in their hand, and they're constantly staring at it every spare moment they have.
Right.
And even if that's not the case, that's still the fact that 46% would self-identify as using it constantly is scary.
Right.
And of course they show how many are using TikTok, and that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother episode of why TikTok needs to be banned immediately and flushed off the internet. But that's, and that's not just because of teens, that's just because of issues with the platform.
Right.
But it's scary to me because, I grew up with technology. I'm of that generation. They talk about the, those of us who grew up with technology, but technology was an adjunct to our life. It wasn't the most important thing in our life. We had a home computer, but we also got told go out and play till the lights turn on at night. That kind of deal. The street lights turn on at night. That kind of deal. Do these kids have a life that doesn't involve that phone?
Well, you often hear a lot of people talking about, you don't see kids outside playing much anymore, apart from kids who are at sports or organized events, but you don't just see kids hanging out in the neighborhoods. I know anecdotally, I work with scouts. I see a lot of, scouts, and I hear from parents, oh, my son, he's on, Fortnite till 2:00 in the morning, and he's always on the thing, and it's and then they're bragging about how well their kid does on it. It's well, I mean, are you Are you parenting them? Are you telling them you can't be on it? Are you turning off the internet access to their devices at a particular time so they go to bed and so they're not online all the time? I mean, we've talked a lot about different tools parents can use, but you also it can't just be a ban where I turn the thing off. You also need to talk to them about what's healthy and also modeling behavior, because are the parents now constantly on their devices too? And I'd like to see some correlative studies that show, okay, so you have the teens who are self-reporting that they're constantly on their devices. What are their parents doing? Are they constantly on their devices too? And so there'd be some interesting stuff. So one of the things I want to bring out, mention here, one of the pieces of data is they said that YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, and Facebook are the big ones. And 35% of teens say they're using at least one of those almost constantly. So a third say they're in one of those, the big five. Now how do we get like the 46%? Well, the others are in something else, at another point in time. 19% say that they use YouTube almost constantly. So 1 in 5. 16% say this about TikTok. 15% about Snapchat. Interestingly, Twitter and Tumblr have both declined a lot since the last survey in 2015. Tumblr used to be the place for teens, and now it's passé because now
Tumblr has tumbled. Oh,
but it was it would have been the place for people who are now in their 20s. They were remembered, and people who are in their 30s up to 40s were probably LiveJournal, before that. It's just whatever the previous generation was using is passé to the current generation, that sort of thing.
And what I find interesting is that I've spoken to teens recently, and some of them were saying that since the pandemic, they've been trying to get away from their screens. So this definition of constantly, does that mean they're watching YouTube constantly because they're not watching television? Is that their preferred method of viewing rather than, so they're going to say, oh yeah, I watch YouTube constantly, in that regard. I'm not sure that kids are wedded to screens as much since the pandemic.
I think for a lot of people, screens have become an auxiliary part of daily life, in the sense of it's there in my hand. And when I'm doing things with other people, I'm looking at things on my phone. Like, so we're having a conversation. I'll look up, a place, or or the other thing is I'm including the people who are in my social media circle in a live conversation I'm having with people I'm present with. I see that a lot too. Like, we're talking about going to the movies, and Bill I'm talking to him on YouTube or TikTok or Snapchat or whatever. Not on YouTube, but Bill on whatever. Or in text, it's the other one, but it's probably the biggest one. Bill says via text that he wants to do this, and so conversations can often be these an amalgam of live and virtual, and I don't think they often have that distinction that we might have.
Right.
I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that a lot.
And I don't see that in itself as a bad thing, Again, like you're talking about, we're going to arrange to go catch a movie, or we're going to arrange to go meet up for coffee or something. And hey, I'll send a text and invite so and so and see what they think, or And then I think that's good. I think that the issue is, again, the stereotypical kid. And again, adults do it too. You're absolutely right. I'm sure they're learning it from their parents, that every spare moment they've got that stupid thing in front of their face.
Let me give you a case in point with parents. Okay, you can all groan now. I went to my 10th Barry Manilow concert the other night. Okay,
get the Copa.
Yeah, you got it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
You got it. And I have to admit, watching the crowd, because I love to crowd watch at something like this, and I haven't been to a concert, and of course I masked up, but every time he came out to sing, 200 phones went up in the air. And I'm now that's not to say I didn't take, and they did not make the announcement anymore. Please do not video any of this. They've stopped making that announcement. But, and I did it a couple of times because there were some things that he has done he did in concert that he very rarely does. So I wanted that. But these people were watching a concert through a screen, through a viewfinder, rather than experiencing it as you're there.
And not necessarily a new thing. People have been doing this for a while. A friend of mine back in the 90s when I was in college, he was on our European campus for a semester, and he was in Vienna, I think he said. And he remembers seeing this guy. They were on a tour, and this one guy had a camcorder, remember those things, and had his eye in the camcorder the entire time. Like, you just watched Vienna on a tiny little screen. Like, how about experience it? You know, I don't begrudge people wanting to record their memories. I love to take pictures, and anyone who's seen my Instagram knows that. I love to take pictures of what we're doing in our family life, whatever. But I also know take the picture, put it down. Like, don't live your life like why? Like, it's good to record things for memories, but don't. I think there's a line of obsessiveness about recording things for our memories, and there's a line I think we're crossing for a lot of stuff.
I agree. Whether kids are falling into the same habits, if they are, they're getting it from their parents who have recorded every single one of their, triumphs and tribulations on some sort of a screen for a long time, because parents have those things out at every event as well.
Well, in talking about social media in particular, again, the TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, all that kind of stuff, it is such an influence on these kids. We've talked about that before, the surveys that show that how many of these kids are influenced by what they see, the influencers, how they really do affect how the kids see themselves. That if they're not showing the smiley, happy person that they see the influencers being, then they feel affected by that. And so on. There's so many of those kind of things going on too. And that's why it concerns me, because there has been an increase of things like depression and ADHD and other things like that could pretty easily be related to this use of this instant on, instant going, mind-changing media.
Part of the constancy, this idea of being constantly in these apps, is the stickiness of the algorithms. And we've talked about it before, but it's worth repeating. TikTok has the endless scroll, like the next video and the next video. And Instagram has done that now with the Reels, and Facebook has its Reels, and YouTube has got Shorts. And now everyone has these things that are designed to just keep you a short video that takes you to the next one. It takes you to the next one. And it's all, and the next one depends on how long you watched the last one, what the content of the last one was. And it's just this draws you in. And I've heard and experienced, I'll be honest here, raise my hand to God, I've done this. I pick up the phone to post something. I see a video, and an hour goes by because I've been flipping through Reels. Like, how did an hour go by? How many did I watch? A couple? Oh no, I probably watched like 40 of them. It's like, it's so easy to get sucked in. I almost, dread going to Instagram and posting, the latest show, because I know that the temptation is there to just, look at the video that it's going to show me. I mean, it's kind of weird, and it feels insidious to that, I'm participating in that. I know that there's good content in these places. Father Roderick Von Hogen is a friend of StarQuest, one of the founders. He's big on TikTok now, and he talks all the time about the value of TikTok and how he reaches people with the gospel there, and how much good stuff he finds there, and interesting and educational. But that's because you've mined it for that. You've had to work to get it. The TikTok itself, apart from the geopolitical issues with TikTok, which, like Father Cory, you're right, we need to talk about those again. But just in the way that it works, you're working against it in order to make it good, and that's the thing I worry about.
Well, and having the self-control to say, no, I'm not going to watch one more. Even just regular YouTube. We're not talking about the shorts. We're just talking about, oh, here's the next recommended video. Oh, one more will be fine. One more will be fine. What do you mean it's midnight?
Right.
And, And I don't get into any of this. So am I abnormal, or am I tastes lie elsewhere.
You're of a particular generation. You didn't grow up immersed in this. I mean, you think about these teens, like someone who's 13 years old today, they don't know a world without Facebook.
That's
Never
true.
mind social media or the internet. They don't know a world without social media. They've been marinating in it their entire lives, these teens. And so, I mean, you and I are old enough where, we remember a time when, never mind before, that we had to dial up. We remember a time before dial up, before the internet.
It's true. I remember party lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and how many of these kids that are teens now, were the ones 10 years ago that they'd start making noise, and so their parents would throw an iPad in their face to watch, something on YouTube.
These kids don't know a world without iPhones and iPads.
That's right.
Yeah. And I'm obviously a little bit younger than the other two panelists, but not by much. And I also remember, a time when we didn't have a home computer, or we did have a home computer, but it wasn't hooked up to anything but the power cord and the TV,
Right.
And and there were times when mom went over and hit the power switch and said, go outside,
But even adults are getting into this, because I know adults who sit there for hours on end watching TikTok or YouTube. And so for me, I just think it's not my preferred method of viewing stuff. Do I, if I want to find out how to do something, I might go somewhere else before I go to YouTube. You know, so it's just I don't know if it's just the way my brain works, but
you might not be a visual learner like that. You may not be someone for whom watching someone do a thing is the primary way that you is the best way for you to learn something. It might be that you're someone who is better at either hearing or reading about a thing. So it could be that difference as well. And again, I don't want people to think that we're doing this generation today, they're terrible. I mean, listen to what we're saying. This is not just teens. This is their parents. This is all of us. That they're just the canary in the coal mine that we're looking at.
And they learned it from somewhere. They just didn't crawl up to one of these devices and start punching at it.
Right.
Yeah.
Another interesting aspect is talking about the technology that they have access to, because we talk like iPhones and iPads their entire lives. 95% of them have access to digital devices like smartphones, 90% to computers, 80% to gaming consoles. I mean, think of that, 95%. 95. That's an amazing number to smartphones. And I mean, this is something I'm struggling with in my own house. I have 3 teens now, and the oldest is 16, and she has a phone that doesn't have phone service. And we're at the point now where she needs phone service, just because the world we live in expects them to have it. And that's
they're going to get assignments via, online resources that they need to do on their phones. This wasn't that long ago. It was in the spring. I was driving past Great Falls High School. Big high school, at least for Montana standards. It's probably small compared to some things like in Boston or Rhode Island. But, and there was a girl out there, a high school girl, that was taking a picture of a leaf with her smartphone. And the assignment was, here's, a list of paper in one hand and the smartphone in the other. And it was, go find X number, kind of like when we were in school, it was go pick leaves, 10 leaves from trees from around your neighborhood.
And tape them to a piece of paper. Yeah.
And now it's go take a picture with your smartphone of 10 leaves.
Right.
10 different leaves.
Isn't there an app for that?
There is.
Well, that will identify them. Yeah.
But still, that's an assignment that requires them to have this capability. And that's where I was actually shocked it was 95%. Instead of like 99.999.
Well, that's the thing is I know people whose kids don't have smartphones who are having these conflicts in schools because the schools assume and that the kids have the phones. Like I was just reading yesterday about a program that a lot of schools are implementing called eHall Pass. It's a service. So you remember when we were kids, Hall Pass. I want to go to the bathroom. Teacher writes a little piece of paper. Here you go. And if someone asks you, here's your pass. Well, now it's eHall Pass. It's all electronic. They can track which kids are going, how often they're going, who they're going at the same time as out of the classroom. And it's this, Well, what are you tracking my kids' bowel movements now? Sorry, I didn't mean gross, but you know what I mean.
No,
like
that Facebook is.
Yeah, I mean, this information is out there, and it's like, what if my kid does it? Like, and it's an e-hall pass, so it obviously means it's something on their phone. What if my kid doesn't have a phone?
And as a former teacher, I'm sitting there going, why didn't I have this?
Yeah.
Right.
And of course, the cynical side of me says, and I'm sure it doesn't track your GPS location.
Oh,
Right.
no.
Not at all.
Well, I mean, if I was had a kid in a school that had this e-hall pass, you could be sure I'd be looking at the privacy settings on the phone and on that app and making sure that it didn't have. Although, the thing is an app that wants these permissions will bug you about it. And keep bugging you and keep bugging you until you give approval. And I can see a kid just like, oh, I just need to go to the bathroom. I'm going to just say yes, I'm obviously not a Luddite. I love technology. I love using technology.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going into a future where these devices are ubiquitous. I mean, we're already there. Everyone's got a smartphone. The question is at what point does it become intrusive? What point does it start harming us spiritually and not just physically? I mean, everyone's got smartphone neck now, though. But I mean, just like spiritually and emotionally harming us by being something that disconnects us from each other, from ourselves, and that's the one that we need to think about.
You say that's the big concern for me as a pastor, as a priest, is what are these kids learning? What is being passed to them? Because we can look at some of the contemporary cultures we have in our country right now, and things that kids are picking up on, issues of sexuality, for example, that our younger and younger kids are being pressed into. And they're learning it from online. They're learning it from social media. They're not learning it in most cases from their parents. They're not learning it from their church. They're learning it from, again, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. And they're not learning that from their parents. What is, in the future, what is being passed on to these kids directly instead of through these social media, and that's a big concern, again, for us as churches, because as a church, we believe very strongly that the best connection is the face-to-face connection. That was the big concern during the pandemic. That's the big concern with these social media, that to really preach the gospel, for example, is a face-to-face thing. It's a person-to-person thing. You can open someone up to hearing the gospel through social media, but ultimately there's going to be that personal connection. The sacraments are personal. We have to be in the presence of the sacrament to receive the sacrament. You can't baptize by, okay, pour water over your head as I say the words, and you're sitting in your bathtub pouring water over your head. You can't do that. It has to be in person. You can't receive the Eucharist except in person. We can't just mail out, Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament to each parishioner and have them receive as they watch the live stream mass, things like that. And that's, so it's what kind of formation are these kids getting in faith, in interpersonal relationship, in dating, in all these things that are, for all of human history, have been interpersonal. Is that being broken? And
I agree, because you got to be in the room. I always say you got to be in the room where it happens in order to, it's spiritually. It's nice that we have live stream. We're still live streaming masses for people who can't get there. But that should be like the exception now and not the total norm, meaning that people should all be coming to church, and they're not. But one thing I wanted to say to you, Dom, is we're not Luddites. We know something that they don't. We know a world without these, and we know the harm that some of what this can do to them. And we're the last ones left now to be able to give as much of that information to them before we're gone. And we need to keep banging that drum. Like, for example, technology in faith formation right now for me is, there is some kind of a screen in every classroom, and we've invested in both a Roku system, getting Rokus for all these, and a NAS, so that we can control what videos and what shorts that they're going to be seeing in their faith formation classes. That's the good use of this. If we hadn't set up the NAS, then it would be, just go out on YouTube and find, no, that's not what we're doing here.
Right.
And each one of them has a Catholic channel on it too. So it gives, and I'm teaching catechists how to find these things. Just don't type Catholic in Google. Won't, you got to be more discerning than that.
And that's where things like Formed is so good, because they have so many good programs on that formed.org. I mean, it's incredible.
If you can afford it. It's tough for my
Our
place.
diocese set up an agreement with them for 1 year for free for everybody in the diocese.
Good for you.
Yeah,
and that's the kind of thing that we need to be looking at, where, okay, instead of handing the kid a YouTube video, hand them something from Formed or something like that, and same thing with classes and everything. And no, this technology has got its benefits. This technology is a great thing. But like you said, Joanne, we know how to turn it off. We know how to walk away from it.
We remember a time when we could.
It's actually, it's heartening. It's heartening. Like you said, Dom, is there are teens that are starting to recognize this isn't good for me all the time.
Yes,
Yeah.
they are.
I do need to be able to turn this off and go do something like pick up a book, or just go outside and sit in the lawn and enjoy a nice day.
Go hang out with your friends at the mall. You know what I mean?
Malls don't exist anymore. Malls don't
where?
exist anymore.
When I was a teen, it was like, oh, you kids hanging out at the mall. I'd be all for it now. Like, go hang out downtown and cause trouble. Just get out of the house and leave your phones behind.
Amazon made sure that malls don't exist anymore. So
That's true.
But no, I agree though. It's just go outside, go to the park, go. The world is relatively safe still to go outside and just have a nice afternoon playing in the park. Heck, some days that sounds good to me as an adult.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, go join Scouts and you can go camping and hiking and enjoy the world around you. All right, so that's it on this topic for now, I think. But obviously, we'll be coming back to this. We talk about this regularly, about how we use technology, and especially teens and kids. And we'll be talking about this again in the future. We want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of technology, including Edward C., Patricia T., Aaron V., Hisha, and Sean G. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the secrets of technology in all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So our next headline I want to talk about is, I think this is one you brought to my attention, Joanne. This is the article Green versus Blue, and there's two blues here versus one green, by the way. Google blasts Apple for broken texting between iPhone and Android. And the article talks about Google's complaints that Apple's end-to-end encrypted iMessage system turns Android users into second-class citizens, and also claims that Apple's proprietary system is not as good as the open source or open standard, not open source, open standard called Rich Communication Services. And that the article then goes into a little bit about the cultural aspect of it. So there's two different aspects here. There's a technology and then there's the cultural issue. But let's talk about the technology first. I've heard this complaint by Google before about, the Apple should be using RCS as a open standard. Although I gotta say, RCS is not as capable. It doesn't do all the same things that iMessage can do. It's still not all there, but also it's not as open a standard as they claim. Google has made some of it modifications to it for their own purposes as well, which is fine by me, but just it's a little disingenuous, I think. Father Cory, as the green bubble in our conversation here, what do you think?
I think Apple needs to knock off the green bubble. No, I mean, let's be honest. Apple could fix this problem one way that they will never do. Bring iMessages to Android.
Right.
They don't have to drop iMessages. Bring out an iMessage. I guarantee you, I would jump over to iMessage instead of... Because Google Messages is not bad. It really isn't. It's a decent enough messaging service, but it's a basic SMS, MMS
RCS,
messaging app. It's got the RCS features where if I'm messaging with someone from Android, it'll show the little so-and-so is writing, so-and-so is typing. Fine, I don't care about that. Frankly, I hate that because then you see the so-and-so is typing and then it disappears and it's like, okay. Yes. Or the little dots, on Facebook or whatever, But that could go away. But all Apple would have to do is bring iMessage and this argument would disappear because nobody would use app or Google Messages. They'd use iMessage. I guarantee you. But Apple won't do that because they've said themselves this is something that can be a little encouragement, a little nudge towards iOS instead of Android.
Competitive advantage, yeah.
But I think that the very idea of doing the green bubble versus the blue bubble, I think it's stupid. And I know the reason that they mention in the article is because that shows that not all the iMessage features will work in this conversation.
Right. I still think it's still stupid. Well, let's talk about continue to talk about the technological aspect first, Joanne, before we get to the cultural issue.
Yeah, it's. I'm one of those blue bubbles who thinks everybody should be a blue bubble. It really doesn't matter. I know that Apple's reason why they won't do it is because then people have more of a choice to buy a phone.
Right.
And while I can understand that from a totally, business point of view, I think it's the matter of this now. I think we're beyond this. I think people are going to choose what they want no matter what. And I think Apple's just got to loosen the reins. Well, how much money do they more need? How much money do they want more? Come on, folks.
I think it's a bit of a fiduciary responsibility to remain competitive and to keep competitive advantages. I get that, but I agree. I think at this point, people have chosen the platform that they're going to use. And how does this harm iPhone users? It does harm us a little bit because we have a degraded experience when people that we are conversing with aren't using iPhone 2 and we try to use these features. And that's not going to make the Android user, my inconvenience isn't going to change the Android user, know? So I think. So this kind of gets into the cultural aspect, but I'll finish my thought on the technological thing because it does frustrate me when I'm, my sister wants to send a video and it comes out of this tiny little blurry pixelated, you can't even see it little video because that's what can be sent via the old SMS system. Or someone with an iPhone, we're in a mixed conversation, they want to they want to do that like press and hold to like, and it copies the entire message over again, especially when it's a really long message.
And I wonder about that because Android now will show that properly. My Android photo, when someone does that, will show that properly now.
I'm still getting it. I'm getting it the way Don's
and that's on
getting
Apple's side at this point. Because mine will, because I remember where it would do that. It would copy the message, so-and-so liked message.
Right.
And now it just does the little bubble at the bottom with the smiley face or whatever.
It could be so this is in a family chat where I have one sibling who refuses to get an iPhone, even though she's all Mac. I don't know what her problem is, but we haven't.
she's smart.
Yeah. Just because she wants to be the outlier.
Right. And with the rest of us are all iPhone. And so it might be she has an older Android device. So
that could be true too.
She probably hasn't updated yet. But that brings the cultural issue, which is like we have these issues where someone shows up in a chat and they're not they're not in the blue bubble and you can't do all the things you want to do. And people who don't understand that there's a difference are trying to do these things and they're getting frustrated. So like my other sister wants to send the emojis and the likes and the whatever the silly things that iMessage can do, and she's can't figure it out. And we have these weird long family text threads. One in the article, there's one guy talks about his teenage son who talks about being ostracized for being an Android user because all his friends are iPhone users, and he found out that they were starting new group chats and excluding him because no one wanted the green bubble in the group chat, which is weird. But
and I have some problems between devices. If I start a conversation on one device, and even though I have it all set up so that, yes, I can keep handing off, green bubbles sometimes don't show up on the other devices.
Well, you won't get SMS coming to your iPad unless it's not cellular, or your Mac, because those are phone conversations.
Right.
So we'll only go to the phone.
Right.
And so it's hard. Sometimes you wonder, like, why can't I respond to this message on my Mac? It's iMessage, right?
Right.
It's a degraded experience for Apple's
all of
customers.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's ways Apple can make that work too, but again, they want to have that as a lock-in, one of many lock-ins, and I just that drives me nuts. That it's just like they can make this work. Like I said, Apple, bring out iMessage for Android, all these problems disappear. The world will be happier. You'll be happier. And you may even get people who say, hey, this iMessage isn't too bad. Maybe I should look into what else iOS can do.
Well, it's the same. It'd be like saying, we're not going to let the Android to have Apple Music or whatever. They've already rolled out their services for people who don't use iOS or Mac, Mac OS. This is another one that they should roll out. And I agree. As a longtime Apple user and diehard fan, I agree. Let Android know how good it is, with a taste of how good it is on the side of the fence. Okay,
just let it go.
Let them have it. Give them a taste. All right,
for the good of the world.
for the good of the world. The next headline is an update of something we talked about recently. I don't know if it was how recently it was, but we talked about in the past, which is this guy in Britain who had a Bitcoin wallet stored on a hard drive that he threw away accidentally over a decade ago. It had 8,000 Bitcoins on it, which today, even after the great cryptocurrency collapse of 2022, is still worth about $180 million. And he knows, fairly certain, that it's buried in his town's dump, the landfill. And he's previously asked the town council to let him dig it up. He'll even share some of the money with them, and they keep saying no. Well, he's back with a new plan. This is in Wales, I guess. It's a Newport in Wales, where he's got venture capitalists who've put up money, $11 million. He's got professional companies. He's got a plan to hire people to sift through the landfill and a special technology that will scan it. He even's got a plan to have like those Boston Dynamic robot dogs as security to patrol. I mean, he's got it looks like a really good plan. They have to scour about 100,000 metric tons of garbage, and it will either, the long plan is 3 years at the cost of $11 million, or a scaled down version that takes 18 months at the cost of $6 million. And then he says, when it's full, when we're done, we'll cap the landfill. We'll build a wind farm or solar power, thing on top of it. We'll take all the environmental precautions, etc. And the city still says no. So, I mean, this is a capped landfill. If you look at the article, when I'll link to it, there's a photo. It's a capped landfill. It's not an active landfill. And so uncapping a landfill is a big environmental thing, and they may not even be allowed to do it by law. So what do y'all think of this story?
Well, yeah, I think the dude's just going to have to realize he's screwed up and it's gone. You're talking about being a capped landfill. It's not just they throw some dirt on it and plant some grass. It's they'll put liner, plastic liner. They'll put drainage field in there. I mean, there's a lot that's done to cap a landfill nowadays. And I hate to say, and the article makes a good point that there's probably about an 80 to 90% chance they'll be able to recover it if the hard drive is complete. If it didn't get crushed, he's out of luck, period.
Yeah.
And he could be out of a lot of money either way. I don't know. My opinion is leave it.
Let it go.
Just let it go, dude. You screwed up.
Yeah.
Life sucks. You thought you were rich. You're not.
I mean, I can imagine. So he's pledged to keep only 30% of what's recovered, which would be $54 million today. That's a lot of money. I get it. You got to move on.
I mean, he's plucky. He's definitely thought this out. Right down to the robotic dogs, which I still think are very scary.
Yes.
Those things are just scary the way they move. But I would, I'm thinking it's buried under all that stuff on top of it, those platter, if it's just sitting in there, a platter's got to be cracked. I mean, you can't tell me that all of that poundage is, it's going to survive all that. And it's been 9 years.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, buddy, you buy a lottery ticket. You'd probably be better off.
I don't blame him. If I had a $50 million payday sitting there, I'd do everything I could to get it too. Like if it was just sitting there waiting for me, I would do all of this too. I mean, I don't blame him, but it's not going to happen. Like it's just.
Well, I know our Lord used the parable of the treasure, selling the everything you own for the treasure in the field.
Yes,
but this isn't exactly
price.
that.
This is not the pearl of great
It
price.
ain't a pearl, let me tell you.
No, he's the guy who buried his talents.
Yes,
exactly.
Agreed.
All right. So James Howell, we're rooting for you, but it's probably a lost cause. So our third headline is interesting. So these AI researchers created this is another one of those models where we tried to see how if we can fool people with it. They created a language model that could emulate a famous philosopher, Daniel Dennett, who they chose him because he's living and thus could evaluate the experiment himself. But also he's talked a lot about AI in his philosophy. But what they did was they created a language model based on all his writings and had an AI develop a bunch of thoughts, philosophical thoughts, and then tried to challenge people whether they could pick out the real versus the AI, stuff he's really said versus what the AI said. And they had different groups of people. They had just ordinary people off the street. They had blog readers, which I guess are people I didn't get who the blog readers were. Were they maybe people who read his blog or philosophical blogs? And then they had people who were experts on the philosopher's works. And even the experts only got about 50% of the time. What did you think of the article, just to start? Actually, let me ask a different question up front. They gave an example of two statements, one which is really said by Dennett and one said by the AI. Did you get a chance to look at those two statements?
No.
Okay. So I looked at them and they said even the experts couldn't pick out which one was Dennett and which one wasn't. I have to say, I found it pretty easy to figure out which one was really Dennett and which one wasn't. So the one that he didn't really say is it says, we've already built digital boxes of truths that can generate more truths, but thank goodness these smart machines don't have beliefs because they aren't able to act on them, not being autonomous agents. The old-fashioned way of making a robot with beliefs is still the best to have a baby. And I'm like, that doesn't sound at all like the other statement. And I'm like, that sounds like AI, like an AI model built that, like a language model. Out of things that someone has said. And it's true. So I found it interesting. What did you think of this experiment?
It is interesting what they can do now with the artificial intelligence learning models. You look at the things online where you can type in, Pope Francis is Darth Vader or something like that, and it'll come up with a picture.
The AI art stuff. The
AI art stuff, and the Stargate SG-1 experiments they've done where they've actually had readings of an AI created, a couple of times they've done now, AI created scripts. And they had like Amanda Tapping, who played Sam Carter, and the actor played Daniel Jackson,
Michael Shanks, Christopher Judge.
Michael Shanks, I had him actually read their lines from this script. And I didn't watch it, but it sounded like it was clearly something that was made up by a computer. It was just disconnected. But the fact that they could get to the point where they could create these things, artificial intelligence, is pretty incredible. Now, as far as this experiment is concerned, it sounds more like the artificial intelligence could mimic his voice, his writing voice.
Yeah. But
not actually produce the same thought that he would.
Well, I think that's one of the important elements of this is that it is the researchers emphasized is the AI is not generating original thought. It's just a language model. It's not doing philosophy. It's creating philosophical sounding phrases that, make sense when you read them, but are not original. It's not intelligence in that sense.
It's a mimic.
Yeah.
It's mimicking. is what it's doing. You're giving it information on what philosophical thought is, and then it's trying to mimic. But is it having an original philosophical thought? No.
Well, and the creators of this experiment point out that yes, I mean they weren't intending to create original thoughts. They're illustrating actually a problem which we all have to deal with, which is actually not unrelated to what we were talking about before. As natural language processing systems become more sophisticated and common, this is from the article, we'll need to grapple with the implications of how easy it can be to be deceived by them.
Okay.
When reading language that sounds realistic or about topics that are deep and meaningful to us, it might be difficult, as generations of science fiction writers have warned, to avoid projecting emotions or insight onto something that doesn't have these qualities. So in other words, we're imbuing into these words more import or meaning or significance than we should. We're giving them more standing than we should, and it'll be easy to be deceived by things like this if we're not careful.
Well, and we've talked before about deep fakes, and that's really kind of one of the concerns that this could lead to is all of a sudden there could be articles showing up where such and such candidate for office or such and such, important person, celebrity or whatever, said X, Y, and Z. And you can find videos where it shows that they said X, Y, and Z, and audio copy of them saying X, Y, and Z, and they never said it. It was completely deepfake, and that's for me more the concern, not so much having an emotional attachment or an intellectual attachment to something an AI came up with, but more the idea of how could this be used to trick people?
Right. We've already seen how fake news headlines can or manipulate large quantities of people. This is another layer of that, and that's harder to detect.
Yeah, the whole thing gets me going just from the deep fake thing. I get very, very nervous about.
Mm-hmm.
But again, those of us who are older, I would think have a little bit more wherewithal to be able to discern a deep fake rather than somebody who is younger.
I don't know.
And well, I'm kind of hoping we do, just because, because of the experience that we have with listening and how we've listened to certain people over the years, that we might be able to say, wait a minute, that doesn't quite sound right.
Although I have to say, younger people who are more familiar with technology may be more skeptical of technology knowing what it can do, whereas older folks who are not as technologically savvy might be easier to fool in many cases because they're not expecting it.
Thus in the case of Nigerian princesses on, email.
Right. Yes. The phishing emails, that sort of stuff. So what it does behoove us is to be cautious and skeptical and to be informed.
Exactly.
So, excellent. All right. So those are our headlines this week. Let's move on to our last segment where we're going to talk about our picks of the week. And Father Cory, why don't you go first with your pick of the week?
So my pick is a website and app for both Android and Apple it's from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency here in the U.S. It's called Air Now. And what it is ultimately, it originally was developed as where you can see all these different air quality monitors that are scattered throughout the country. And I think it actually, if I remember right, it also even goes like up into Canada, so it can do some international. Yeah, it does. So it shows you what are these monitors showing for air quality. And by air quality, this is particulates, this is ozone levels, this is, all the stuff that makes smog and things like that. And it's mostly important for those who have weakened immune systems, their lung capacity is weakened or so on, where bad air can affect them much more severely than someone maybe who's healthy. But also if there's some really serious issue, let's say like a fire burning right next door that could cause, actual medical issues, health issues. Well, they've added onto this app where you go in, bring it up and it will show you like whatever their closest monitor is to where you're at, the air quality. Like right now it's saying mine's at 48, which 0 to 50 is good. 50 to 100 is a different level and so on. So right now it's right at borderline good. But they've added a really good feature for those of us in the West, because anybody who lives in the Western United States knows summer is wildfire season. And they've added a feature that ties into the Forest Service's INCI web, where it shows you where there are forest fires, wildfires, and the smoke that's being produced by them. So like right now, I can see that we have a lot of smoke because there's fires not that far from here, within about 100 miles. And there's also fires coming down from Canada and so on. So they show you that you can see a map, a Google map, actually, I believe it is, that that shows you where the fires are, where the smoke's coming from, what the monitors are showing close by you. It's really, again, for somebody like me who lives in the West, knowing where these fires are can be essential, because we had a fire last summer that was just 5 miles away. And in this app, you can not just see where the fires are, but what's burned, what information is there about it. So, it's a great app for those of us who are in the West, but for people in general, if you're kind of concerned, if air feels like you can smell some smoke in the air, or the air feels a little bit thick, well, you can see why. So it's EPA, from the EPA, called Air Now, and it's a great little app. It's free, of course, because it's from the government, so it's worth checking out.
So some of this, like, you can get an air quality index number in, like, I know on the iPhone, you can get it in the weather app and even on the Maps app, but it doesn't have all the detail and all the data, and especially the fire information like this does. So this might be something additional people want to consider. I noticed that it actually installs and runs on my Mac, on a Silicon Mac, because it has an iPad app. So I can run it on my Mac.
Well, you can also go, I think it's airnow.gov or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's just a website, so.
So very good. Excellent. That's very useful.
Now, last time it was lightning. Now it's air quality.
I agree with all the weather.
I'm on a trend.
You're on a roll.
It's summer. Got to be outside.
Yes, exactly. I'll be doing a blizzard forecast ones in the winter.
There we go.
Joanne, what's your pick this week?
Well, it's out of one of my tales of woe. The next two picks will probably be from my tales of woe, with my husband moving to the Windows dark side machine, and we have to change everything else in our office setting. I picked up the Joby Podzilla medium tripod. Now, Jobies are great because they're very pliable. And you can tie them in knots, and you can hang them on to things. But I was looking at the small one going, oh, it might be a little too small. The big one looked too big. So I went just right and went in the middle. And it's this is something that not only is good when it's stationary, but it also is good when you are out and about. Because when you're doing either your selfie thing, or you're doing filming outside and you have to walk around and hold it, it's very, very sturdy. It's a tripod, and it has for your camera on. I'm sure if you buy the large, you can also put an iPad on that, but it's very reasonably priced. And right now it's going to be my main tripod for using my webcam. You can put also, because of it comes with an extra piece that you can put a little tiny light on it if you like to buy those small lights for looking good, and also the microphone on the other side.
Right. It's got a basic 1/4-20 adapter that attaches to anything that uses a little screw thing too. So that's, you can put anything on it. Yeah.
Yep. But I just like the way it will move wherever I want it to. I haven't figured out quite yet how it's going to work in my setting, but I've also used it already to film, like at church at times, and just it's much sturdier to hold in my hand, and I don't see a lot of jumping. Which you see with something smaller or more, lightweight.
Yeah.
This has a good weight to it.
Yeah,
it has a good weight to it. So, it's $35 at Amazon, and it was the best $35 I've spent in a while.
And that is the kit that includes the phone mount.
You get everything.
Yeah,
you get everything in it.
That's pretty good. That's excellent. All right, so my pick this week is an app called How to Spot. and it is a search engine or for your Mac. Why not just use the Siri search on your Mac, you might ask, or the Spotlight search? Well, you could do that, but this is much more powerful. This lets you do all kinds of very particular searches, digging down. It gives you so many different ways to search for things, and inside of files. You can even search inside of your Mail, Apple Mail app. So that's really useful. And I don't use it all the time. Like when I'm looking for a file, I can usually I'm thinking of the title of something. But there's once in a while I run into something where I know it was a file that had something this in it. What is it? And then you can sometimes search in Spotlight for that, and you get all kinds of system files and all kinds of other stuff. This allows you to really narrow things down to exactly what you want, and will come up with the right things. It is a $34 app, but if you are a SetApp subscriber like I am, you get it included. Sorry, folks. Recently, I've been just going through all my SetApp apps that I use, and if you've heard how often I've said that it's in SetApp, you start to get an idea of maybe it's worth that monthly fee to get SetApp. They're not a sponsor. They could sponsor if they wanted, but I'm just a happy customer of SetApp, and How to Spot. So they have a couple other apps. There's the same people who did Howda software. They have Howda Geo, which is fun if you take a lot of photos with an SLR that doesn't have GPS in it. If you use your phone, it usually tags it. But Howda Geo lets you tag photos with geolocation after the fact and that sort of thing. So they have a great bunch of software there. So that will do it for. Oh, one other thing. I forgot to mention this. My last tip. This just happened yesterday, I think. If you are a Mac user who uses Zoom, which nowadays is everybody who's a Mac user, update your Zoom right away. There is a 0-day exploit that would allow someone to take control of your Mac. Update your Zoom. Do not wait.
Did that today.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Do not wait.
All you got to do is just launch the Zoom app without a meeting, and then go to checked updates. The Zoom menu, check updates, and it'll download it real quick.
And then tell everyone including people who don't listen to tech podcasts. This is your duty as a techie who listens to tech podcasts, is to inform all the non-techies about such things. We need to nip these things in the bud as soon as they become visible. And
by the way, I'm going to avoid the rant about how change logs don't actually tell you anything, because this just says, we just got some security updates.
Yeah, a big one. Thanks, Zoom. This is a big update, an important one. All right, so that should do it for us this time. I want to tell you that we'd love to get your feedback, just like we had James's feedback at the beginning of this episode. We want to get your feedback on things we've talked about. You can do that at sqpn.com/technology, or our Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send an email to technology@sqpn.com. Visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord, where we're having some great conversations, by the way, with the listeners about the tech that they're using. And you'll find links from our discussion and our picks of the week on our show notes at sqpn.com. Remember to like each episode of Secrets of Tech wherever you find us on Facebook or Twitter or any of those places, and leave comments there. We'd like to thank James for his research assistance in this episode. And until next time, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of technology.
Thank you, Dom.
Joanne Mercier, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.